All right, good evening. It is 5:38 on Wednesday, February 10th, 2016. It is the monthly meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Could I please have a roll call?
Francis Rigberg Baker. Kevin Bowersox Johnson.
Here.
Samuel Bindum.
Here.
Daniel Larson.
Here.
Lisa Mosley.
Here.
Peter Resnick.
Here.
And Aisha Lam Sobe.
Thank you, Tony. Looking over the agenda, are there any additions, edits, or corrections that need to be made? If not, is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Looking over the January 13th minutes, are there any additions, corrections, edits that need to be made? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
And second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All righty. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out on this cold night. We're going to be jumping right to new business, as there is no public participation and there is no old business to address. And we are very fortunate to have a couple of guests with us tonight that Tony is going to introduce. Tony.
All right. It is our pleasure to welcome Ms. Sheila Ferguson, Chief Executive Officer of Community Elements, and Ms. Celeste Blodgett, who also comes to us from Community Elements. She serves as a supervisor and program coordinator for the Champaign County Reentry Program, Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program. For the benefit of our viewing audience and for anyone who's not familiar, Community Elements serves the Champaign-Urbana community and beyond by educating, advocating, and helping to build communities of well-being by providing individuals and families with a range of prevention, intervention, and behavioral health treatment services. Their services are culturally inclusive, client and/or family focused, and recovery centered through service excellence, mentoring, and leadership. So welcome, Ms. Ferguson and Ms. Blodgett, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us tonight. I'm going to provide an overview, and Celeste is also going to, towards the end, talk a little bit more about our criminal justice programs to give you a little bit more detail in those areas. So for me tonight, my presentation goals are to talk about the basis of all the services that we provide at Community Elements, and that's based on a recovery principle and practice model. I'll talk about who we are and who we serve, and a brief outline of our services and programs. I actually have some pictures so people can become more familiar with our sites and facilities. I think that helps. We'll talk about the criminal justice programs because we know there is an interest in spending a few more minutes there. And then I'll talk about our agency in our fiscal year 16, which we're in, and kind of beyond. So recovery is really a process of change to which individuals improve their health and wellness and live a self-directed life and strive to reach their full potential. So the most important part about everything that we do at Community Elements is about community wellness, but it's from the perspective of not only the people we serve, but the people who serve them, our employees, and also our community as a whole, our board, and everyone else who's part of that. The four dimensions that support recovery are health, home, purpose, and community. And you'll see as I go through here that we're addressing issues related to how people can physically and emotionally live a healthy life. And important to the development of Community Elements and who we are over time is that we have a number of options for people to have a safe and stable place to live. It's a really important part as people are recovering, especially from serious mental health conditions. Purpose and community are equally important, so these four pillars are part of how we develop our programs and implement them across the community. The last word on this slide I always make a special point in saying is because for some of us we have loved ones who have a mental health condition or a substance abuse issue, and HOPE really helps guide those people who are feeling at their lowest into treatment and into the supports and the feelings of love and friendship that can come out of belonging to a community that cares and understands. So recovery-based care, again, is focusing on the people we serve, their ability to cope with life's challenges, build resilience, not just manage symptoms, and really raise awareness that people can and do recover. And then we really try to learn as much as we can through best practice models, educating ourselves as an organization about how people really do recover and stay well and what those individual goals and sort of what we have in our toolboxes as clinicians to share with them. So I think you did a great job of covering our mission. So here is our mission. It's broad, and it is embracing a model that is more what you see along the public health perspective. And so I think that's really important because, again, it's about the public well-being and the community wellness as a whole, and who we are and what we do in those particular areas where more treatment is needed. The goal is still to move people to that place in time when they don't need us as much as maybe they do initially. I have a little bit of our data here to just give you a sense of how many people that we serve. Clients served is really a number that I try to distinguish from some of the other programs that we have, because people always ask me, how many people do we serve that have treatment plans, that have clinical or serious mental health conditions? And it's 4,312 in 2015. But we have so many different programs that we need to give away for the community to understand that it's not just treatment that we're doing, we're also doing some support plans. We do education and group interventions, and so there's another 4,629, usually 0 through end of life, so kids, pregnant and parenting teens, through end of life, that we provide some supportive education services or group interventions for that aren't necessarily mental health or what we would perceive as having a serious mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. What we're also known for in the community is how many people we house. And so here's some numbers for the nights of care we provide to those residents that live with us and receive treatment from us. The longest standing program is Crisis Line and our crisis assessments, well known but also very integrated in a lot of businesses at the university. We provide that with the police departments and in the various different hospital settings. And our crisis lines and assessments account for 6,352 individual events, so pretty significant for a community of our size. So we'll move to, again, sort of what we do. We have this array of services, education, advocacy, through to housing and residential services, which are the higher end or more intensive type services. Some of our facilities. So this facility is one of our clinic-based facilities. It's at 1801 Fox Drive in Champaign. Here we house a lot of our children and family programs, our outpatient counseling and therapy. We're open 3 to 4 nights a week here. We also have our HR department here, some of our leadership staff, and some specialized programs for kids like Parenting with Love and Limits is operating out of this building. Again, along the back wall, we have, it's actually towards the back of the building, we have a lot of cubicles and places where our staff work. They come in to do their paperwork there, but still about 65% of our staff work in community settings, in homes and in other settings where people are receiving services in a comfortable setting for them. So we don't expect everybody to come here. And so in addition to the services that people come here for, like counseling and therapy, our home visiting program is going into homes and working with young mothers and pregnant and parenting and helping with that to really help address some issues related to preventing child abuse and neglect and encourage issues like immunization, for example. So really important pieces of the overall wellness. In 2013, we moved out of a downtown building. We were across from the Virginia Theater into a building that is 1801 North Walnut. And in this building, we have a lot of our rehabilitation services, and we see some unique partnerships that have emerged over some of the crisis related to the financial situation with the state. So I'm referencing really how we've been able to help with psychiatry and move it to a model where the FQHC, Promise Healthcare, is operating the medical services within the Walnut Clinic. This is like weeks new. So we started in January. We're entering our second week of really working alongside medical practitioners. So someone here could come in and see the psychiatrist, but also see a primary care clinician as well. So more of a holistic, and right now I can tell you that we're more co-located. We haven't really worked on the integration piece as well because each agency has their own paperwork, and so we're looking at ways in which we could strive towards a more integrated model. Also located here is our case management division, and again, lots of cubicles, people out in the field. We have our groups working here. We have 5 group rooms. So we have both mental health groups and also substance abuse. So we're doing some substance abuse services and hoping to increase that, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Our crisis team is here, but most importantly, and the reason why the crisis team is here is because they also form our access unit. So we are available for walk-in appointments at this particular clinic 5 days a week from 8 to 4 generally. So I say generally because closer to 4 o'clock on Fridays, we will be moving towards a different model where the crisis team is more independent and out in the community and in the hospitals and other settings. So our 2 clinic sites I've talked about. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our housing continuum. So we work really closely with the inpatient settings, not only the inpatient settings, of course, here in our community, but if our loved ones are sent to communities because the beds are available somewhere else. So often, there is a limitation on how many people can be served here, but we have settings that we work with that are state-operated facilities as well. So we're working to bring those community members back when their treatment is complete and in outpatient. We have our own 24-hour sites. We have acute and supervised sites, intermittent, supported, independent, and prevention. The highest level of care that we have is our respite center, which is for people with intensive short-term crisis needs. We have a psychiatrist and we have nursing staff here. It's a 7-bed facility. We actually started it in 1994 and have moved it to this facility, which will look familiar to you because the outside of the building is actually this particular program is housed in the same facility or same building as Time Center. And so I tell people the way to remember the respite center is that it has a blue awning and it faces Market Street. It is completely separate from the rest of the building and contained in a way that it's safe and comfortable for the people who are staying there. The stabilization of symptoms, because often folks who are here have a great range of symptoms that they're experiencing, and so we're working to help them. This avoids a person being hospitalized if they don't need to be, and so it's really critical to our continuum. It's also really important to mention that a lot of times, or at least in the last year or so, people are talking about we need a place for someone to go when they're experiencing a crisis. Well, we've actually had one for 20 years, since 1994, excuse me, and the important part of it for us is to make sure that it's safe and comfortable for people, but we're also not an open facility. So people who really need that level of care are determined needing that level of care by physicians, and the physicians have the ability to admit people and discharge people from this site. We often have people who come into that program and are needing additional housing or additional supports, and so our next level of care as we move to sort of independence is our 24-hour group homes. We have 8 and 5-bed homes that are scattered throughout the community. They're staffed 24 hours a day. They're co-ed, they're transitional, so they're very home-like, and we do some of the same services except for the doctor and nurse aren't there. So our supportive sites, we have many, many of them, and here you can imagine, like in the sense of going from 24-hour to more intermittent, we're going from seeing that person really every day to a point where maybe someone is in one of our apartment programs and is being seen once a week. We have had people who've moved from the respite center to the group home, and then we'll see them more often until they feel comfortable and they have their surroundings and settings and supports in place to help their recovery. We have a transitional program at the Time Center, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we have a number of vouchers and supports that we can use for both adults and adolescent young adults. And you can see them here. One of our apartment buildings is just behind, actually, this building on Elm Street. We've had it since 1989. It's an 8 single-bedroom apartment building that we own and operate, helping people transition from those more intensive settings to independence. They're fully independent. We also have 2 larger apartment buildings that we put together really in 1994. So my time with the agency dates back to this because I was an intern when we applied for the grant that actually helped us build the Urbana complex in 1994. So I've been with the agency for about 23 years, been in a lot of the clinical programs I've been in through there, was a crisis team member for over almost 14 years and still a part of the crisis debriefing team for emergency situations throughout the community. So a lot of us at Community Elements have a long legacy of building these programs and then being here and operating them. And so these are kind of like loves of my life, because this is the actual end of a continuum of services where permanent housing is the goal. And so permanent housing, there's leases, people don't have to be in treatment to live here, but these housing units are stable, affordable, and safe. That's part of our push at Community Elements, is to try to build more of these. But until some funding changes, it's impossible for us to move forward with that. But again, these are full community integration. They are not subject to increases like you see across our rental properties in the communities. And of course, we know with competition, and now we see lots of apartment buildings, we're not sure what's going to happen when all those units become available. But here, people can live, and we have people who've been there since 1994. So they're sought after in Urbana, and I think Rantoul has a little bit more of a turnover because of the transportation. So people have moved actually from Urbana to Rantoul to Urbana when they can. Our prevention settings are all those settings that aren't typically associated with a treatment facility. So Time Center is one of them. We've been involved with Time Center since 1997. And we moved those. Actually, there are 4 programs that are under the roof of Time Center. The first is really the Community Soup Kitchen, which operates separately. And then we have the dorm side, which is a 50-pad program, level 1, transitional. A 20-pad program, or sorry, 20-bed program in a 10-room section, which is L-shaped, that wraps around the respite center. So those 4 programs together make up the building occupancy. And we also operate Roundhouse and the homeless youth programs. We took that over in 2003 from Chassis when they had financial problems and moved out of our community. So we maintain a DCFS license, and we can have youth age 11 through 17. We have 6 beds co-ed, and we can house on the first floor a young homeless female who's pregnant or parenting. And so we have 1 bed there that has been used pretty frequently to help young mom. We're going to switch over and talk a little bit about the criminal justice programs.
Okay, so the goal of the criminal justice programs at Community Elements are really to provide coordinated response with jail staff, corrections, as well as law enforcement out in the community. We engage and provide essential crisis intervention, mental health, substance use services in the community, in the jail. That's something we should really highlight. We are actually in the jail providing screenings, assessments, treatment plans in some cases, which is a part of evidence-based practices that you'll read about a lot in literature that you'll find for criminal justice programming throughout our country now. Jail and Reach is actually a very important piece of that. So the Mental Health Board funds crisis access and benefits, criminal justice and integrated behavioral health, which is substance abuse treatment services inside of the jail, and criminal justice problem-solving courts, which is what we work with the drug court clients, but on the mental health piece. And then the reentry program is really what I'm more familiar with. Its inception started in 2014. We formed a reentry council of local criminal justice, social service leaders in our community, as well as people with lived experience, to help guide the program and what we are doing into the future. We have been seeing people since June 2014 with case management, things that we can provide to people coming back to our community from incarceration include obtaining an ID, and then linkage to available resources in our community for things like housing, employment, education, signed up for benefits, helping them with coverage for primary medical care, and then of course linkage to substance abuse and mental health treatment as well. Since the inception of this program, we've seen we've contacted over 400 people, screened over 300, and we have currently, I believe it's over 150 people have engaged in this program. And then the new grant that the county received is the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant, which is being co-administered by the Sheriff's Office and Community Elements. It is a 2-year planning grant from the Department of Justice, in which we will gather another committee, or have gathered another committee, much like the Reentry Council, to kind of guide and plan for what this program is going to look like, what our outcomes are going to look like for this community, and what we want the community to look like after implementation of this program. I think that slide pretty much covers what I just said. So some of the data-driven analysis that we'll be doing includes the needs for improved screening and engagement, a diversion center, enhanced law enforcement crisis response. I don't know if some of you have heard maybe of co-responder situations with social service providers and law enforcement. We do a lot of that with the crisis team. Then targeted information sharing systems, one of the main barriers that we've really faced with both reentry and what we are looking at with this program is just the information silos from the different agencies that are involved, whether it's housing, hospitals, mental health, all of the different service agencies that are combined, how we get that to talk to each other to really understand the population that we're dealing with and how to better address their needs. So some of the challenges that we are looking at, no access to local detox, no assessment center. I know that we used to have a mental health court for a while. We would like to see that happen again. Minimal space for counseling and group services at the county jail, as I've already said, lack of affordable housing, resources, and then vocational opportunities for people coming back from incarceration or that we're trying to deflect from the criminal justice system in general.
So I'll kind of wrap up a little bit here with this slide. These are the things that Community Elements, in terms of our strategic planning, are working on going forward. Of course, we have a history, and we continue to advocate for people with serious, significant diagnoses. We're going to continue to promote recovery and treatment, including best practice models. Fully integrated health record, working really hard on that for the same reason that really Celeste was talking. We still have a lot of silos to be able to talk with each other and openly share that information. Again, we're doing a lot of education, presentation, social media, breaking down the stigma and encouraging people to reach out. Some of our new best practice models are here, looking at evidence-based enhancement and certainly of trauma-informed care models, and continuing, if funding allows us to build safe, affordable, and supported housing. The biggest news for us this year has been a December publicly announced direction of the board, which is towards a merger. We're in the due diligence phase right now, and intends to merge with Rosecrans, which is a substance abuse, or primarily a large substance abuse provider. And partnering with them, we're hoping and have begun the plans to build out substance abuse services for adolescents, young adults, and of course those people with dual diagnoses. So we have a very small program working right now with those people who are dually diagnosed that are criminal justice involved, but we really need to do more. So with that, I'll turn it over to you if you have any questions for us.
Yeah, excuse me. Obviously, our mission has a lot to do with discrimination, and we've had a concentration on reentry and folks with who've been incarcerated and how they're treated in the community. I'd like to hear a little bit about if you've had issues with discrimination against folks with criminal records, either in employment, in housing, or just generally in public services, and if there's anything we can do to partner with you. And maybe a little more off base, and it didn't occur to me until you made the full presentation, the ordinance in Urbana also says that there is to be no discrimination against people with mental disabilities. And I'm wondering if you've had any experience with that kind of discrimination going on, and whether we can help in some way in that area.
Well, as far as people returning to our community and specific discrimination, part of what we're doing is reaching out to local employers to see who are willing to hire people with criminal histories. And we really, I have gotten hung up on or just told, no, we don't have any space. So yes, that exists. As far as housing, we work with property owners who are willing to rent to people with criminal histories, but that is provided they can afford the rent. We have recently approached the Public Housing Authority of Champaign County for a reentry housing pilot project that so far has not been well received, but we are going to press forward. So sure, the stigma and discrimination are alive and well everywhere, but that's part of what we're doing.
So as far as that goes, especially with the employment issue, because of the changes we've recently made to our enforcement practices, I am quite sure that Alex would be happy to work with folks who are maybe unwilling to employ people who have criminal records, maybe by way of education at first, to see if we can encourage them to do so. Obviously, some of this is about education, and should there be great resistance, using those enforcement actions would obviously be helpful. It's interesting to hear that affordability is, of course, the major element on the housing side. And what about mental disabilities in general? Is that an issue that you've dealt with?
I do think that there are barriers, and education is important. And on the reentry side, Alex and both city mayors, I believe, are invited to the next reentry council to begin to break those barriers you're talking about and really figure out how we can help each other, because I do think some of the ordinances get in the way of that, especially if or policies and practices that have been historic without having maybe taken into consideration like a new pilot program or trying something like a housing opportunity for people, to give an opportunity for people who can't afford full maybe community participation. On the mental health side, we still have issues related to employment, and sometimes it has to do with where a person is in their recovery too. They're looking for entry-level positions, maybe part-time positions. It's difficult at times because a lot of our fast food and other types of opportunities for people can be too much. And they usually will say 10 hours, but then it turns out that they need them 15 or 20, and then we start to see a problem with sleeping patterns and medications. We have been successful with working with employers, but I have to tell you, too, the state doesn't fund employment programs the way that they used to for mental health either, so we've got kind of a double bind there. How we can partner is, again, to try to let people know that there are individuals who want to work, but you have to understand that they, for example, maybe can't work nights. That's not a possibility, but to play to somebody's strengths, you really have to get to know them. And for us, our case managers do a good job one-on-one, filling out the application with them and working with them. At Time Center, we have a job club and job really supports and helps. So the different programs have some different strategies that have been really beneficial to people. And we don't try to put a limit on that. So if you have a mental health condition and you're at Time Center, you're in the job club, and we're working really hard to make sure that if you want to work, you have the opportunity to work.
I'm wondering, just from a resource for you kind of perspective, I think this is something my former life was an HR manager, and the local chapter of SHRM,
Yes.
They offer educational opportunities for the HR managers in this town, and I think it would be great for them to hear about your program and how you can partner with them and their organizations to help with the employment search and to kind of, break down some barriers. So it's the Central Illinois Human Resources Group.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think they would be, I think they would welcome a presentation to their membership.
Thanks,
Good
Kevin.
idea.
Any additional questions, comments?
I forgot to mention, thank you for coming, by the way. We really
Absolutely.
appreciate it. And for the work that you do.
Indeed, indeed.
Thank you again
Thank you.
for inviting us, and we look forward to, so if you have questions about anything that we do, or you find that you're dealing with issues that touch us, please let us know. I know Alex will. He is becoming more involved with a lot of us, so we really appreciate your support, and thanks for having us tonight.
And do remember that, if you are encountering discrimination issues on your end, we do have that enforcement aspect, and we can move from just trying to educate people to enforcing the ordinance when that becomes necessary.
It's good, thank you.
Good to know.
Yes.
Thank you.
So yes, thank you again for coming down. Have a good evening.
Thanks. You too.
All righty, we're going to move forward with item B under new business, and that is to discuss the business card, sort of layout, content, et cetera. Tony?
So in your packet, we included a mock-up of what we envision our business card looking like. The other side just sort of shows you, it's blank right now because it's sort of showing you what we could put on the back. Francis Rigberg Baker, who couldn't be with us this evening, sent.
Fran circulated some
Did you see?
suggestions.
Did you see those already?
Yeah, I did, but I don't think everyone
Okay.
else did.
I have copies here. If you'd like to.
Okay, yeah. I didn't do it yet, but I know we also talked about possibly culling from the ordinance, maybe, a phrase or two. We could certainly do that. I like the notion of somewhere indicating, we meet every second Wednesday. That's kind of easy to,
Especially in the back.
yeah, on the back.
Have we explored anything like a QR code or a QRF code or something like that on the back of the card? That way it'll pull up the website.
Oh, this thing that you scan?
Yes.
I haven't.
They're
heard of it.
relatively easy to create, and they
Yeah.
have
It's a great idea.
They have a little website that you can just generate one and stick it on the back. So
Okay, I'll certainly bring that up to Alex.
That-
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Does anyone, by chance, point up the, or you pull?
yeah, I was
Okay,
looking to
thanks.
grab the ordinance.
I don't have that.
Um,
But I think, I love the front,
Yeah.
front, it's uniform with all the other city agencies and whatnot, right?
Yes, this is the same
I
format
mean, it
that
looks
like
very
my
good.
business cards have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I looked at this, I love the design. I love the information that's there. The one thing that was missing, and part of this has to do with the dialogue that goes on between the person who's handing the card to the person who needs the card, but is why would I call this office? And it's hard to do that in a sentence or two, but that's the one thing that is like, when would I use this card, or who's going to answer the phone when I call, or
Kevin, sorry.
no, go for it.
Do those two lines begin to enforcing the ordinance and promoting, I mean, does that get, I mean, I know it's a little vague, of
I
course.
like promoting equal rights and healthy community relations.
not
Enforcing the
answering
Urbana
your-
Human Rights Ordinance, I'm not quite sure people even know what that
That's
is
a great-
necessarily, or what the ordinance entails.
Correct.
So,
And in part, that's sort of why I like the first one the most,
Yeah.
acting to end discrimination.
Pretty blatant.
It is really pretty straightforward on what
Yeah.
this is about. You
Do
know,
you like it?
healthy community relations and equal rights is sort of high level, and
Yeah.
I like the sentiment, but ending discrimination is really the bones of what we
Yeah.
do. And so
Peter,
yeah, go ahead.
it's on the mock-up Tony sent around, it's sort of a subheading under our title.
Right.
Do you like it there? Do we want it in big letters on the back? Do we want it repeated? What do you, or,
Yeah, it's a good question.
I like the QR code, so that
Yeah.
would be, that would take up
Quarter.
almost half to a
Or half.
quarter to half, depending on what information you wanted to put in there, because it gets bigger with information, in order to be scanned correctly. So I could see where then the other half could be just really quickly, have you been discriminated in, employment or housing in the city of Urbana?
if so, call it.
If so, call the information
Contact us.
forwarded on the front of the card to submit a formal complaint or whatever. I mean, you want the language to be a little bit, you want it to be direct but also soft, like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But explain what you would do with this card.
I think for it, are we doing a single run of cards for the office? Is that the plan? I mean, Alex has his own cards, I take it.
Yes. We would use our normal business card vendor. And so, we could do a single run of, I think 250 is the smallest number you can get. Most of us will order 500 at a time. And I think you can get more than that, although I've never personally ordered more
So
than that. But
one thing I would say is we've got the web address for the HRO and not the commission, which is probably, for if these are cards that are intended for us to be giving out, having the commission email address, URL is probably the right thing to do, and both pages point to the other one, so I don't think there's an issue there. The email address, I think, is fine. I don't think there's a real need for the fax number on this card. And it'll
We're
save a
giving it,
little
yeah.
space.
Yeah, we're giving, right.
And, yeah, I like the idea of something along, and I don't know how small you can make a QR code.
It just
Um,
depends
Can I ask,
on the,
Yeah.
how do you scan that?
with your phone.
You point your cell phone at it, or
Any kind of cell phone?
most smartphones and most tablets.
Probably
Because I'm
2000.
thinking of people who may not have a lot of
That's true.
technology.
It may not be.
However, and I'm not opposed to it, I have a smartphone, I guess I could do it, I've never done it, I guess, so I'm gonna be that, other
It's a good-
person, but
yeah.
having the website, I think is definitely important, because you could go to the library and look that kind of thing up.
So I think having the website on the front is ideal, and I would say that on the back, having that meet second Wednesday of every month is also important.
Yeah.
So if we have to sacrifice the QR code for
And I'm not saying
the
use
essential
those.
information,
Devil's advocate.
but yeah, I don't know how small you can shrink them and still have them readable.
Right. I mean, personally, I love the QR code idea, but as we talk about it, like, usually if I have a business card, I wouldn't scan it. Where I do think a QR code would be really great is on the required employment poster.
Yeah.
That's where I think it would be really most useful. I like the idea of having it on the card, but if it does distract from information that needs to go on, I really do think, though, like, I know that when we give these cards out, it's mostly going to be a part of a dialogue, and we're going to explain why you would use
Yeah,
this card.
I'm-
But,
Mhm.
if
I'm
we
thinking
ever want to leave a couple
individuals.
cards with people,
Yeah.
that then they're going to forward the card on.
And one of the things I think when we get into our committees too is if we are going to speak at a place, I think
Yeah.
then having it, and those might be places where technology is abundant and not good,
Yeah.
for that agency or such. So I can see both
Yeah.
points. I think, just being able to hand that out, direct them, point, if it's an individual case, point someone in the right direction or share information with the network.
Again, I don't use the codes very often as well, but I just think it's smart to show that we're, you know,
Contemporary.
we're on, you know, we want to make our presence more known. This is another way of, you know, I'm assuming, I have no idea, but under 30, I bet they use it all the time. I'm sure, I don't know the numbers, but, or whatever. Under, under 50, yeah.
In regards to the fax number, one, if it kind of correlates with the way everybody else does it, I'd be fine. Also, is any information that we receive from a lodge complaint come via fax anymore? No?
I've
Okay.
actually never seen it come by fax.
Okay,
I-
so,
And like Peter said, for this card, for us to pass out, I don't think we need the fax.
That's
For Alex.
possibly, yeah, but
That makes
normally that
sense.
either comes by mail or by email.
The stuff that I've seen
Mhm.
come in faxed are things like those forms for.
Contracts.
For the contracts,
Yeah.
and that on Alex's card makes a lot of sense.
I think we cut it here,
You know,
right?
but he's going to be primary contact for those folks. So I guess I would suggest acting to end discrimination on the front of the card, I think is great. Having the meet second Wednesday on the back.
I think low, like the bottom, the last
Exactly.
line.
Having, if you've been discriminated against,
Question.
you know, please
Or-
contact us somewhere on the back is
Yeah.
also a great idea. And if we can fit the QR code in among that, I think that's an ideal use of the space.
If we're just using the code to direct them to one or the websites, can that be, that doesn't contain, can that be minimized? Someone was implying that the more information contained, the bigger it is, or?
I don't,
Or is that?
I don't think so,
Okay.
unless you go to the 3D version of the QR codes. I think if you're just doing a website, it's the same no matter.
About the size of a quarter,
I-
a square quarter?
I think so, and that's the question, is how small they can be shrunk and still readable by a device.
Okay.
And I'm sure we can look that up on the web and find out.
I love the first bullet under the HRO website. Investigate and respond to discrimination in fair housing claims under state laws and the City of Urbana Human Rights Ordinance. Like, that's when, you know, if, yeah, like, it's clear. It starts with major activities of the Human Relations Division, but making that more actionable to the person, I think.
And you mean on the card, or?
Yeah, in regards to defining what we do.
Yeah, if we can trim that down space-wise, because, I mean, we don't want the back to become completely unreadable.
Well, that's why I think the first bullet alone is better
Is
than,
probably-
is enough for what this card would be used for versus all the other things.
So maybe ask, I only heard the one time, maybe ask the question, what
Right.
does the HRC do for the community? I mean, and that's
Yeah.
terrible language, but is that?
Yeah.
Like I said,
Or,
it's still, because your
Yeah.
question was, why would you contact us?
right.
Could you read that excerpt again, Kevin? I'm
It says,
sorry.
"We investigate and respond to discrimination in fair housing claims under state laws and the City of Urbana Human Rights Ordinance,
Can
sorry."
you cut the state law and the
Right.
ordinance part, but?
Yeah,
Or just left it at investigate and respond to discrimination.
Exactly.
and
right.
fair
Like
housing,
that.
Exactly.
yeah.
It's
I would
not
say in
just
employment
housing.
and housing,
I was gonna say it's employment, it's housing, it's.
And
Public
public accommodation, but I think, yeah.
Employment and
but-
housing are the two, sorry, go ahead.
I'm
and-
just thinking
and-
of the categories we've talked about.
Right. The only thing that I am less enthusiastic about that formulation
investigate.
is the word investigate, because
Yeah.
that is, you know,
Something-
Alex's responsibility,
Yeah.
but our responsibility is,
To hear.
yeah, I mean, I sort of liked your formulation
Right.
of the question, you know, have you been discriminated against in the city of Urbana?
yeah,
You know, contact us.
Yeah.
I think that tightly does what
right.
we're wanting to find out about.
Tony wanted to.
Just a couple of thoughts, if I may. If we're going to save space by omitting the fax number on the front of the card, how would it sound to say acting to end discrimination in our community? What do you think? Just a few extra words,
Yeah,
but
no.
you know.
I like that.
And then.
Because that's another, I mean, that's what we're all about, is community. So I feel
Right.
like, I think that's an important addition.
Right. And then of course, we could put the have you experienced discrimination in housing, employment, public accommodation, and so forth on the back of the card, along with, when we meet and public welcome and all that. I wonder, though, if we end up having space for a QRC code, would it have any effect on a smartphone's ability to scan it if it were in raised typeset? I'm not sure that it would be, but on the front of the business cards, the way they're printed, the city logo and all the
U is
text.
raised, yeah.
Yeah, it's raised typeset.
I think it's much more about the sharpness of the edge of the print, so I don't think the raised would make a difference.
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten far enough yet to determine whether the back of the card would also have raised print. We know that, I have contacted our vendor, and we know that they can print on both sides of the card without a problem.
I
So
think
I
there's a
could-
couple places we could save space, and we could put like a single line or two additional that says on the front to not print anything on the back, just to say from printing cost. Contact us if you have been discriminated against in employment or housing, period. That's it, that one line. And we can do that by, after City of Urbana, putting the straight line, and then Human Relations Office, 400 South Vine Street, could also be another, what is the straight line called? I forget. It has a technical name. Anyway, the straight line and then Urbana after that. So that saves two lines right there, and then just, a quick one sentence, contact us if you feel you've been discriminated in.
Where do you like the placement of that on the first
I would just put it at the very bottom.
bottom again? I
Yeah.
like that. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that's, in going back to, I know Alex's concern about printing on both sides was cost, so to address that. But being a techie, I kind of like the QR code too, so.
But then it would be
You can
nice
get
and
it
clean
in
on the
there.
back, though. QRO code, and then meet every second, that bottom phrase, and it'd be very clean.
Yeah, it would just cost us to print on both
Would-
sides.
yeah,
But
yep.
I don't think, we don't spend a lot of our budget, so I don't think it'll be a big deal.
We rarely spend our printing budget, that's for sure.
Did we want to finalize this by our next meeting and have a mock-up? Do we want to finalize it today? I'm very flexible, I think.
I think I'd love for Fran to see it, since she,
Since she took some.
and
time
anyone else too, but
I think we could.
is there a rush to decide anything?
I think I don't think so. I think what we could do, if you want, is Alex or I could incorporate the changes that we've discussed this evening into the mock-up, get it back to you next meeting or before if you want, and go from there. That way Fran gets an opportunity to see it, and Aisha, and, if we have any questions or changes, we can.
And we have 2 new people coming.
Potential.
That's right.
So, yeah, does that sound
Yeah.
good?
And maybe, I'm not trying to give you more work, Tony, but if there's a substantial, if you could let us know the difference between a one-sided card and a two for cost, I mean,
Sure.
just so we know.
Yeah,
If that's
not-
okay, I don't
actually a
mean,
good idea.
sorry to,
Yeah, that's not difficult at all.
but thank you, yeah, I like where it's headed. You guys, anything else, thoughts? Yeah, so acting to end discrimination in our community. Do we like that phrase? Is it, Sam,
Well,
are you talking?
it's kind of like, I'm just thinking in terms of brackets. I understand that our goal is to work specifically within the community, but is it a larger goal of just acting to end discrimination?
In our community and beyond? That's getting a little wordy,
I
maybe,
think
but.
we're doing
But-
education. Are you thinking? the
No,
scope?
just, I'm saying, when you say acting to end discrimination, it leaves it open to being more encompassing,
Mm.
to say,
In the school, in the community. I mean,
Wherever,
it's
we're just acting to
it's
end
everywhere.
discrimination.
So we're,
you know,
that's a good question. I think we got a month to think about it. I'm not trying to pass the ball or buck, but
If you want, I can go ahead and put it on the mock-up.
yeah.
So you can look at it, see how you like
We
it.
could
If we
cut
want
the
to strike
two
it, we can
words, or-
strike it.
I still think,
And if you all want to come up with a couple of, I mean,
Yeah.
mock-ups are cheap, so if you want to come up with a couple of different suggestions
I-
of arrangements of things or different wordings, I think that would be fine.
Sure, we can come up with a few choices for you to look at.
great. Thank you, Tony. All righty, let's move forward to our committee reports. Community relations.
So I just kind of have an announcement. I mentioned the immigration issue, I think, last month, and the Immigration Project is having a community get-to-know each other tomorrow. What is that? February 11th at 5 o'clock at Cowboy Monkey. It's kind of more of an informal get-together. I went to their website just to gather a little more information and what they're doing to help immigration in our community. So I think there's a few people I know that may be going out, so if anybody else is interested to join us, and
This was tomorrow night, 7, Cowboy Monkey?
5 o'clock.
Sorry, 5 o'clock?
I'm sorry, I don't have my mic. Yes.
Great.
Otherwise, Fran and I have not met to talk about community relations. I did get to look over the survey we completed, and I thought there were some really great suggestions that I'm excited to talk with Fran about.
Excellent, thank you, Lisa. Criminal justice, I have not yet contacted my new partner Samuel, so we will have something for you definitively next month. I don't mean to speak for you, but,
Oh, speak.
okay. So we are going to connect, but I think our last two guests are going to be great resources. Celeste and, I can't remember who visited us, Elizabeth? Does that sound possible? From last month,
Ginsburg. I can't think of her first name.
Rebecca.
Rebecca, excuse me. So I think we got a few great contacts among other, there are others, but last two visitors have been right in our wheelhouse. So we have some work to do, starting with me. So we'll have our first real update next month. Ordinance Enforcement Committee.
I'm afraid it's a schedule failure, mostly on my part. I was doing a lot of travel this month, and we will be right on it as soon as possible.
Awesome, thank you, Peter. And finally, Training and Development Committee. Kevin?
Yeah, so I got the feedback from the surveys as well. There's some really good feedback. One of my favorites is getting educated on restorative justice, which I've actually participated in. And we've got some great resources here in this town on how to implement restorative justice, which is, I was so impressed with the process when we went through it. So, so I'm excited to bring maybe Alex and I are still still slowly handing off the baton in regards to who he's contacted and who still I could contact, and that will be one of the first people that I do, because I think that would be a great presentation. I also gave you packets. I don't want to go over it right now. This is kind of just, I also sent the digital version of this to Tony. This is kind of like what a start of maybe a new board member orientation
Yeah.
agenda would look like, and things to keep in mind, including at the end a few pages of
The guide looks great, Kevin, thank you.
parliamentary procedures. So,
Vocabulary. or-
yeah, so it's something I took from another organization that I'm on the board of that I created. So it just kind of gets us started in helping transition new board members. So feel free to take a look at that, give suggestions of any place that I've missed. And from that, we can actually move forward with actually building like an orientation folder or whatever based on the checklists and that are inside there.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Excellent, Kevin. We'll look these over and check back in next month. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Alrighty, Tony, we're going to move on then to our staff report. Where would you like to take us? Where would you like to begin?
Okay. How about we start with the workforce statistics, if you don't mind. We have 4 new vendors and 2 renewals. The the new vendors are all in the business of auto parts, and the requests for approvals come from the Public Works Department. So Bumper to Bumper, relatively small organization. They're just a little bit over our threshold of 15, which is why we're recommending 1 year for them. Carterson Safety Corp. Actually, I'm sorry, they are being requested by the fire department, not by Public Works. Only 2 employees, so we're recommending 2 years for them. Similarly with Dust and Son, 9 employees, so we're recommending 2 years. Motor Parts and Equipment Corporation, a bit larger, and given their minority hiring numbers, we're recommending 1 year. Our renewals are municipal emergency services being requested by the fire department. It looks like they've had some degree of improvement, yet we're still going to recommend 1 year, of course, dependent on the commission's approval. And similarly with Allied Waste, they appear to have lost 4 employees. Which may be, partially responsible for the slight increase in minority hiring percentage. So again, we're recommending 1 year for them as well.
Alrighty, is there a motion on the floor to get to discussion? Or questions, discussions before we move?
Yeah,
Samuel.
I have a question. I
Please.
just, as I'm looking at the renewals, do we know how long the approval has been? Has it been that they've only been renewed 1 year, or is this someone who, I'm assuming it's not new, so they've been in the system for a while? And so my question is, how many years have we renewed, and is there any way to see if there has been any improvement or stagnation?
Beyond 1 year.
That's a great year in parentheses.
Okay.
The year,
The initial year?
the initial year.
Okay.
So usually it's like
And,
2.
and so Municipal Emergency Services looks like they applied originally in 2013, and they haven't asked for a renewal in 3 years. So this is the first time we've seen them again in 3 years. And it can't be much beyond that, because we haven't been doing them
So they have.
forever.
They've not been able to contract with us, but they did not renew.
Okay.
Right.
And the last renewal was for a year then?
Yeah. So, and maybe we should discuss a little and the criteria here. 2-year approval is basically, we are happy for the city to go on and contract with them, and we don't have any further contact with the vendor at that time. For 1 year or 6-month approval, which are the other 2, and depending on which one changes the tone, there's usually a letter that's sent out by the office, and Alex contacts the vendor, talks to them, make sure they're doing some work to improve the numbers. And the only other choice we can, well, there are 2 other choices. We can ask for more information if we don't feel like there's enough here to make a decision on, and we can also determine that they don't meet the criteria and begin the proceedings to not approve them. Generally speaking, we have only gone down that path once or twice, and usually folks come and explain what they're doing to improve things, and so we give them a 6-month approval. But we have not gone down the path far enough to say, nope, we're not approving, period. We have not gotten to that point in our procedures yet.
So, and then I think Allied first applied in 2014, so this is their first this is their first, or is that true?
I seem to remember that Allied's been with us longer than that. I think that was just last year's numbers
Okay,
versus
so
this year's numbers. So I think they've been around on our books for quite some time.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while.
I would say, and not offering a motion, but just a comment, Motor Parts and Equipment Corp., which is Napa Auto Parts out in Champaign, is the one that causes me the most concern of the bunch. Their numbers are really pretty abysmal. I would be inclined to go for a 6-month approval and see where they're at, rather than the 1 year. With regard to the 2 renewals, it looks like Municipal Emergency Services, at least in the Latino community, done some good work. Doesn't look like they've made terribly much progress in the African American community. They've had some decent increase in the number of women, but again, a relatively small number here. So I'm comfortable, and Allied Waste seems to have lost a few employees and hasn't really lost any minority employees, although I'm always surprised to see no Latino employees in a local company. But each of the 1 year seems reasonable for those.
Other thoughts, observations? Should we break them up into renewal? Can we do it all in one motion, or should?
I can do one big omnibus motion if you like.
Let's hear it, Pete.
So I'll move to approve Bumper to Bumper for 1 year, Carterson Safety Corp. for 2 years, Dust and Son for 2 years, Motor Parts and Equipment Corp. for 6 months, Municipal Emergency Services for 1 year, and Allied Waste for 1 year.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion, questions, thoughts?
This is
Kevin?
more logistical, but like in trying to look at some of these things, like the women's columns just doesn't put, like I can't read any of the numbers, like in order to see like what roles they're playing. So that's just a logistics kind of concern in regards to looking at, because they're not counted in the final minority percentage. So I'm just kind of looking at that.
And usually they come through better than that one.
Yeah.
I think that one must have been faxed
Yeah,
and
that-
copied.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, Tony, if you could keep an eye out for ones that become unreadable in the PDF.
Yeah, I really had to squint at that one. When I was-
So we do have a standing motion. As any other observations or comments? If not, then all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, the same? The motion carried. I'm supposed to say that, sorry. All righty, Tony, HRO activity report.
Okay, so you have before you the substantial contacts and the monthly complaint status report. If you have any questions for Alex, I would be happy to pass those along to him. Otherwise, if there's no discussion, I can give you the budget report.
Sounds good.
Okay. We have had one relatively minor expenditure on, and I think I forgot to include this last month. We reimbursed Alex for some office supplies that he purchased himself for report production. That was in the amount of $37.90 to our traffic stop study line item. It was for the printing and binding of the IDOT Traffic Stop Data Task Force report. So that leaves us with a balance of $462.10. Otherwise, we have no new expenditures since last month.
Great. Tony, thank you. Any announcements? I would just say Parkland hosted a beautiful MLK celebration. The new Student Union was a great space to house that event, and we saw some great members of the community acknowledged for their wonderful work, and so it was another successful year. I'm glad we could be a part of that celebration. Kevin, did you have an announcement? Sorry.
No,
Or-
just more of a
Or
comment, thought. In looking at, I mean, the state budget is just causing havoc on many social services
Indeed.
organizations here, and just finding ways, I've been just really trying to rack my brain in ways that we can help as a city and as a commission, just because, for example, Races announced that if they don't raise enough money, they'll be closing their doors as early as April.
Wow.
And that would be a huge loss to our community, a huge loss.
Indeed.
And that's only one of many organizations facing it. And if we don't try in some way, shape, or form as a community to be preventative, we'll definitely have some things to deal with on the back end.
Absolutely. Anything else? All right, everybody, great seeing you. We'll see you hopefully in a little bit of a warmer March. This meeting is adjourned.